Good evening, everyone. Welcome. You're watching SkepTalk on the line. Today, it is Monday. It is August the 12th of 2024, and the lines are open. If you'd like to call in with a question or argument about what we're doing here tonight, what we're mostly focusing on is talk with science, religion, any of those sorts of great intersections, we want to hear about it. Call in at 720-619-2288, or if you are calling in from the U.S., if you'd like to call in from the web, you can find the link in the description and in the chat. My name is Aaron. Guest today here, we have Owen Morgan. So, Owen, from what I understand, you have a tale to tell about your channel, Telltale.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the tale. I used to go by Telltale Atheist when I started in 2016 or 2015, maybe. And then I dropped atheist from the name in 6 months. So it was still like 2016. Then I dropped Telltale entirely a couple of years ago, I think. And everyone still calls me Telltale Atheist. I don't know how that caught on. Like somebody from 2016 still watching my stuff. Super weird.
I do have a YouTube channel, but I think most of my stuff is also like pre-2020. So it's covered in digital cobwebs. That and also most of it is and most of my stuff is also just intro to physics help questions because before my current job, I was a physics teacher, both college and high school level. So if you want something dry and listen to me saying and ah a lot while I'm doing equations in front of you, I can help you go to sleep.
That is actually super interesting. Seriously, I actually do have some questions that I could ask.
Well, we can start with that since right now I don't see anyone calling in, and we are a bit science-focused on SkepTalk, so if you got science questions, I'm here to screw it up.
Okay, yeah, I can ask you a couple things. First of all, do you know anything about string theory or no?
A little bit, just a bit of background. So I did my PhD work at the Ohio State University, and one of my teachers there, Samir Mathur, is basically one of the top people in what are called fuzzball models of black holes using string theory.
Okay,
had a class with him or two, and he was on my thesis panel. So in theory, I know something of what he did.
That's awesome. Okay. What do you know about wormholes? Do you think it's likely that those exist?
So those sorts of solutions to general relativity, unfortunately, it's only a solution to general relativity. You don't need string theory to be true to do the math for those. But the sorts of issues you'll have there is that to have this sort of connection between two different places in space and time and actually travel through there, you have the issue that you got to have something that actually holds it open. Basically, it's like a door with a whole lot of gravity, and so it wants to close itself. And quite literally, even a photon of light trying to travel through would cause it to collapse before you can navigate the whole thing. So you would actually need something to hold it open, and the stuff that seems to hold it open is sometimes in literature called exotic matter, and it's exotic in that it has negative mass. If you're wondering where you can go and find negative mass, it's in the land of imagination. As far as we could tell, it's non-physical. It has all sorts of weird properties, such as if there was something in my room here that had negative mass, and I pushed it to the right, it would accelerate to the left. That negative sign would mean it does everything weird you can think of. You could make perpetual motion machines, all sorts of nutty stuff. So in general, if wormholes can exist, it's going to require extremely exotic physics to be true. So I don't hold much hope out for it.
And I guess that exotic matter, you said, is it's theoretical, right? Like it's probably in the math, in the papers, but it's not actually something that we can empirically prove yet, or?
Oh, it's even well. Basically, it's much like this. It's like you solve for the equation and you see what result you would need to get that what you're trying to find, and then you look at that and say this doesn't work. It'd be like if you do an algebra problem and you're solving for how many apples does your company just sell to stay in business, and it comes out to square root of -1. You would basically say, oh, am I going to go and buy -1 or square root -1 apples, or am I going to say this is physically impossible? That's
Right.
the kind of thing that pops out. You see the result and you say this is a non-physical result, so that's not going to happen. At the very least, if this sort of matter did exist, it would have all sorts of things that we would say are at least weird. They would seem to allow the violations of other things that we think are fundamental. And perhaps the most important thing is if you can build these wormholes, you could potentially build time machines, and then you get all the paradoxes that come along with that. And nature seems to do a pretty good job to make sure you can't go back in time and kill your grandfather before he meets your grandmother. Those sorts of things nature seems to try to prevent us from accidentally doing.
Yeah, I was reading something, and you know Michio Kaku. Have you heard his name?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You may have even heard about this thing, but just in case you haven't, I think he plays into like pop science a lot, and it may not necessarily be like scientifically accurate. The things he says just kind of, you know. Anyway, he was talking
Yeah.
about time travel. He says we have the entire theory of time travel worked out. Now it's an engineering problem. What do you think?
He. It's really frustrating because he clearly knows his stuff. He's a professor at NYU. You don't get to go there
I didn't know
by
that.
not knowing how to do the math. I'm pretty sure he's at NYU. I could be wrong about that, but that's my memory. Nonetheless, he definitely knows his stuff. He's been working in string theory, I believe, for a very long time, and has been doing science communication stuff since I think at least the 90s. I think it's when his book Hyperspace came out and inspired a lot of people about higher dimensions and all that sorts of good stuff. Thing is, though, he is in some ways a bit too much of a hype man for my interest. That not only does he go above and beyond and being enthusiastic for what physics might say, but he's definitely too confident in saying things about what's actually true and doable, because there are so many issues with time travel, especially because you have all the various paradoxes, and if you want to avoid them, you tend to not be able to do the things you might really want to do. So, for example, one way to avoid the time paradoxes is you go back in time and you're basically creating a new branch of universe, so you're not really affecting your timeline, because then you get all the possible paradoxes of you preventing yourself going back in time and not doing that thing in the first place, the seeming contradiction that includes. So if you say that is a solution, you throw out all the abilities of, say, take back stock ticket information back in time and make yourself a millionaire in the 1960s or something like that.
Right. Do you
Um,
think it's
yeah.
likely that time travel will ever be attainable in? Yeah, I mean, do you think it's possible that we can do it, or is it just never going to happen?
I'm I'm at least very skeptical. It seems that like I say, there are just seeming like logical paradoxes, and you don't usually physics around logic. Those who do that, I really question if you're getting every factor of two correctly when you're doing the math equations. In general, you need some sort of other way to avoid those paradoxes, and when you do that, I think you also avoid the stuff that we usually find interesting when it comes to traveling back in time, whether it's change your past or, well, especially changing your past. That seems to be something the universe is going to prevent us from doing. But boy, oh boy, it would be amazing if we could figure out a way of not changing the past, but just observing the past. If we could just have some sort of nebulous camera that can float around and just see what's going on without actually changing anything. But even that is hard to justify, because observing also changes things, as we know from quantum mechanics, that any observation requires interaction. And if you're interacting, you're going to potentially change the way things would have gone otherwise. So I'm very skeptical that the fundamental nature of reality will allow us to do that.
Yeah, it was interesting you mentioned that with quantum mechanics, the act of observing. I think you're referencing the double slit experiment, probably, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the big examples of observing the thing you're trying to do changes the outcome.
Right. And I was watching something about that not too long ago. A lot of people like misunderstand it. To my knowledge, because of this old like science video where it tried to make it out like it was this spooky thing that was like,
Mm.
that like the electrons and stuff are sentient and trying to avoid being seen or some other thing. But
Yeah.
but to my knowledge, the act of observing collapses their wave function because we have to bounce particles off of it, right? Is that right?
Um, Whether there's wave collapse or not is dependent on your interpretation of quantum mechanics, but fundamentally, to observe a thing requires an interaction. You can't observe a thing without nudging it in some way. In a sense, if you want to know where something is, your eyes are closed and you're having to bump your fingers around. In that process, you have to bump. It's just that with light, the bump is so small that we never notice that bumping at our human scales. But when you're talking about electrons, the bump is very measurable.
Right. And the butterfly effect, of course, would completely change everything, even just observing stuff,
Yeah.
I guess.
Potentially, it's a little bit questionable to what extent the butterfly effect will be there, because it makes it so that, yeah, chaotic systems are really hard to predict. But on the other hand, it's still the case that there's so many other things that whatever wave ripples you might have in the effects you're having will get swamped out by everything else. So the idea that a butterfly flaps its wings in Africa and it causes a hurricane in Florida, that is a little bit overblown. But it is the case that, yeah, it does make predicting with very high precision over long periods of time difficult.
Very interesting. Yeah. I don't know. That kind of stuff interests the hell out of me. Have you heard that thing about Schrodinger? Stop me if we're ready to take calls or anything, but it's a pretty interesting subject to me. Schrodinger's, just in case the audience doesn't know, I know you do, but you know the whole bit about Schrodinger where you've got a cat and the cat may or may not exist when you're not observing it. And people have theorized that maybe the universe kind of creates the results. Like if a tree falls in the forest, then does it make a sound? And to my knowledge, I don't know if you've heard this, but I believe that physicists have concluded that it does in fact make a sound and that it is actually real and it's not just collapsing into a decision in any moment. It's actually happening. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, so like I say, a big part of it is which interpretation of quantum mechanics you find the most correct. And in particular, when Schrodinger came up with his idea of the dead or alive cat in a box, that was actually to try to show like a reductio ad absurdum to what's called the Copenhagen interpretations. That the thing is in some sort of state of all possibilities, but then it only chooses one state when you observe it, and that's the collapse of the wave function. Schrodinger is just like, hell no. And you can't just say this is at the microscopic level and not the macroscopic. He comes with an idea of, hey, here's a cat. We can use this idea of a bit of radioactivity, which is ultimately going to be a quantum mechanical event, and have some sort of macroscopic observable. The cat is dead or alive because it's poisoned when the detector senses a little bit of radiation from a piece of uranium. That was the idea. So 50-50 chance the cat is dead because of the probability that the radiation from the radium or the uranium has gone off. So the cat is both dead and alive on that interpretation. On the other hand, for example, on the many worlds interpretation, is the cat dead or alive? The answer is yes, because both worlds exist.
Oh, that's super interesting. So I guess it's kind of bringing in the multiverse aspect of like time travel and everything into Schrodinger, huh?
Yes and no, just because physicists have to make things difficult. The many worlds of that interpretation isn't the same thing as the multiverse or the inflationary universe or things like that. So there are many universes. There are multiverses to make things confusing. And if you read a physics paper and it says the universe, you have to read carefully and realize, are they talking about the observable universe, all possible universes, things that are just very local to us?
Now, right? The multiverse?
It's not necessarily a fact. It is a very plausible interpretation of what's called cosmic inflation, which is used to explain issues with the original Big Bang theory. Inflation was first created by a guy by the name of Alan Guth at MIT, who's still there and has the exact same haircut he had in 1980. But yeah, obviously super cool, smart guy, and most cosmologists would say inflation is real, and inflation pretty naturally gives you pretty much endless universe creation, but it's not confirmed at the same extent as the Big Bang itself. So it's still on the edge of what we can prove. It's like we have a lot of confidence, but we don't have like what we have for the Big Bang. Not yet, at least.
Okay, that's super fascinating. I have. I'm sorry. I don't mean to like pull you off in different directions. I just want Anyway,
Oh,
have you heard anything about you know, the Higgs boson and how it, how we discovered like the fact that like a Higgs field exists? Have you looked into that at all?
I better have because I used to work at the Large Hadron Collider, so I'm still
No
slightly
way,
radioactive from
really?
that.
Oh
Yeah,
my God,
I worked there for a couple of summers. My girlfriend at the time got her PhD doing work there. Um,
it's
uh,
crazy.
yeah, so good times, good times. Yeah, and so
Yeah.
it's now been just over 12 years since we announced the confirmation of that. And so, yeah, the Higgs boson is the result of the Higgs field. What's the Higgs field? It's basically the reason that various subatomic particles have mass in the first place. And by having that mass, it allows for all the building blocks that we love to have, so we can have things like chemistry. And the biologists tell me chemistry is important for what they do. So,
Right. Okay,
yeah, I'm happy we have it.
so let me lay this out, and you tell me if it's like correct or if I'm totally off base. To my knowledge, there's like a net or a web for electromagnetic fields, right? Where it's kind of woven together with bosons or with like particles or whatever. And when you kind of smack it, you can make pieces of it kind of fly off, and you can detect those pieces. Is that right?
The basic thing is that what the Higgs field is that it's a what's called a yeah. So the field basically is saying it says something about how strong it is at any given like position or direction, and other particles can interact with this field by what's called the hypercharge. What's hypercharge? It happens to be just like a collection of other quantum numbers that pop up. But in the same sort of way with like the electric field, that if you have charges like electric charges, electrons, protons, they interact with that field and give you all sorts of interesting stuff. The interesting thing, though, is with a field like this, it can also self-interact. If you put enough energy into there, the field can interact with itself strongly enough to create a particle momentarily, and that's what the Higgs boson is. So the whole point was
Interesting.
try to get enough energy in one spot to have the Higgs field interact with itself strongly enough to pop out those Higgs bosons. Now, the thing is, though, the Higgs boson itself, we can't see. So what we end up seeing is not the Higgs boson itself, but we realize, according to our models, it will decay into other particles we can detect. So the huge detectors they have there basically have to be around there and detect the decay products. And it has to happen enough that we can say it's happening, that we're seeing these other particles more than you'd expect from just background noise. So you have to create many, many, many of these Higgs bosons. You don't just collect one, put in a jar, and say, look what we found. You have to have so much statistical data to support it that the chances that you got this are much less than 1 in a million. And now I think
Right.
the data for the Higgs boson is like much better than 1 in a billion chance that it's just a statistical fluke.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I understand that. Like, what did you learn from your time working in that area, other than the fact that they have a Shiva statue there and they're trying to destroy the world through Satanism? What kind of interesting things did you pick up there?
Well, it's the least effective way of building a TARDIS.
Okay.
Uh,
Damn,
I mean,
this close.
yeah, yeah. Most of the machine is underground, and that is for a number of reasons. One is the fact that the circle itself, the ring that it runs under, is something like 16 miles around, and you don't want that going through farmers' fields as this thing is spinning around just outside of Geneva, Switzerland. That's a lot of real estate that you can't just barge these giant magnets through. Um, Also, the energy requirements of this thing are pretty bad. So during wintertime, during Christmas time, everyone goes on break, in part because it's Christmas, but also because of electricity prices. The amount of energy it takes to heat Geneva is about the same energy it is to keep the Large Hadron Collider running. So basically, it's like, what you going to do? Keep the people of Geneva warm or run this particle accelerator on Christmas? Answer becomes pretty obvious at that point.
Wow, that's crazy. I had no idea it sucked up so much energy. It doesn't let off any radioactivity, does it? Is there radioactivity there?
Well, it does, but fortunately, the radiation it produces is only while it's running, and it's all basically being shot out underground. Specifically, though, the kind of radiation it's mostly producing is X-rays. So this interesting phenomenon is called Bremsstrahlung radiation. So they use a German word to sound fancy, but all it basically is that you have a charged particle and you accelerate it, it gives off radiation. And because they're shooting protons around at extremely high velocities in a circle, by going in a circle, they're accelerating, and so they give off pretty strong X-rays, which means you cannot be down when the machine is running because you will be killed by that radiation. No questions about it.
Wow, just by X-rays it'll kill you?
Oh, yeah. The dosage would be... I don't know how long you'd have to be down there to start instantly showing effects, but you would get a dosage pretty darn quickly that you would have too much cell damage to survive long term.
That is nuts. I know that there are probably people waiting, so I don't want to hold them up too much longer, but I do have two more questions, if that's okay.
I just do want to say one thing, though, that it is absolutely safe, because one, that's all underground. Two, nobody's underground when the machine is running. Like, you cannot be down there. They have plenty of security there. And three, everyone who works there is carrying a dosimeter on their chest. So you're actually measuring how much radiation when you're around there. And you check the monitors around there. You stick it in, see what it says. And honestly, I got more radiation flying to Europe than I did from working there. So it's such a small amount that you really shouldn't be worried.
That is super interesting. So we were talking about radiation a second ago. There are two types of radiation. I mean, certainly more than that, I imagine. But the two that I'm thinking of are wave-based, I guess, like X-ray and gamma rays and stuff. And then the other is, I guess, through particles decaying. Is that right? Like, am I on base here, or is that wrong?
So, yes and no. There's particle-based and there's wave-based radiation, but the main ones we talk about, there's three: alpha, beta, and gamma. Alpha radiation is actually helium nuclei, 2 protons, 2 neutrons, that will often come out during nuclear decay events. Beta decay is usually either an electron or a positron, the antimatter version of an electron. This also usually comes out during radioactive decays. These are also the easiest kinds of radiation to detect because these are charged particles. The helium nucleus, it has 2 positive charges. The positron is either positive the electron is negatively charged, the positron is positively charged. And if you want to, you can actually at home build a device to detect those kinds of particles.
That's cool.
All you need is isopropyl alcohol and get it really cold with dry ice. You can basically make a cloud chamber. And if you have a radioactive source in there, you can see these little lines just spitting out from there. The really fat lines are alpha decay particles, and the thin, straighter lines that go really fast, those are beta decays.
That is absolutely crazy.
And then lastly, the gamma rays, that's all forms of light. So technically, the light that we see with our eyes is a form of gamma radiation, but it's at a level that we don't even think it's even possible to seriously hurt us. So gamma radiation is anything from radio waves to the most powerful X-rays out there. And it's just a matter of the wavelength and how much energy is in that level of light.
Okay, that makes sense. Very interesting. I don't know. I could talk about this stuff forever. I'm super interested in it.
Yeah, but I do want to make sure that we are being nice to our calls. And we do have one caller lined up right now. So feeling good to hop over to that. All right. So let me bring on our first caller is Emily from New England. She is an atheist. Emily, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you guys doing?
All right.
Yep, doing well.
All right.
So
Emily,
I'm calling.
What do you want to talk about? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm calling to get a skeptic's opinion. I have consulted my therapist and my pain doctors, and they are giving me what I feel is not a skeptic's opinion, but I am desperate. As we all know, when people are in pain, they are in medical situations that are not good. They can do desperate things, and I have a lot of pain issues. And in my medical situation, we've gotten to a point where my doctor says, we've done the injections, we've done the procedures, we've done the medications that we are willing to prescribe. Maybe you should try chiropractic. Maybe you should try acupuncture. Maybe you should try X, Y, and Z. And I talked to my therapist about it because I am desperate for pain relief, but I am also a skeptical person, and I have some medical training. I'm not a doctor, but I did used to work in physical therapy, and so I know how to read medical research papers. And I've done the research, so I know that the efficacy of those fields are quite poor. There are good chiropractors, but there are few. And what the good ones are basically PTs and massage therapists under a different name,
Agreed.
And and I am desperate, and I feel like a hypocrite, and I don't know what to do. And my therapist says, go do it. And my doctor says, go do it. And I don't know. And I was wondering what you guys would do if you were in my position.
What do you think? Do you have anything to say about it? I have some stuff to say about it. You want to go first?
I'll try to say a few things. So one, Emily, I get the feeling you know the medical literature on this better than Owen or I would by a long shot. So I am glad that you can be well informed on this, because I do not feel comfortable giving significant medical advice. What little I know about the placebo effect, which is ultimately what acupuncture or chiropractic is likely to provide, my understanding is the placebo effect even works on people who know it is just placebo. So I'm just trying to think from the point of view of the doctor why they would recommend that, even if they know the evidence for it is bunk, that they're just desperate to find something for you, even if it is a placebo. I'm just trying to think from their point of view, even if it is not a good evidence-based or scientifically based approach. The only other thing I can think of is... Go ahead, please.
I think part of it is that even PTs are trained in a little bit of spinal manipulation. It's not what chiros do, what the average chiros do, but PT spinal manipulation is different than what chiro spinal manipulation is. But some chiros do PT spinal manipulation instead of chiro spinal manipulation, which is what I mean when I say some chiros are PTs in disguise. So the doctors sometimes say, like, find a good chiro, and they emphasize good, and they give you a wink. But then they're like, we can't recommend someone. And it's like, well, if you can't recommend, you're kind of throwing me to the wolves now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Interesting that they wouldn't want to recommend. Like, I can't stand chiropractic. It bothers the hell out of me, and it bothers me when anybody recommends it. But I wonder, like, what excuse they would give for not recommending a chiropractor. Is it because they're not a real medical professional and they know that? Or is there, like, a law about it? I don't know.
I don't know either, but I'm desperate at this point because I can barely move. Like I'm not eligible for surgery. But
you don't have to, but do you want to tell us like what the physical issue is, or?
I have a connective tissue disease, and then I have fibro on top of it. So think of lupus, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, it's like that.
Okay. As Aron was saying, yeah, placebo effect is probably what the doctor is reaching for. And you know, like you said, the placebo effect works on people even if they don't know, or I'm sorry, even if they know that it's the placebo effect. But God, it's so hard to give advice on this because, you know, it's a really big choice that should really be left up to the person. But I would probably talk to like multiple doctors to get multiple opinions. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the best I could suggest is whether you like this doctor or not, the best you could do is find another doctor who seems to be, who will especially limit themselves to science-based discussions of these sorts of things. Unfortunately, I don't know any doctors that you could personally reach out to. And when I try to think of science-based doctors, what comes to my mind is like Stephen Novella from Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. But I don't think he does house calls.
I'm
Wouldn't it be
sure that
wonderful
there are
if you
some
did?
others out there.
I get the feeling if he did, he'd be traveling all over the country, if not the world, saying, no, not that, this.
There's so many of us who are just on the desperate end at this point, where we're just like flailing around for anything, even when we know better. Because I know better, I do, but like I need the pain to end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can also imagine doctors right now are a bit scared about prescribing things because of what's happened with Oxycontin across the country. Because, I mean, that was originally being prescribed to help.
My doctor will not prescribe most opiates. So most pain medicine is off the table automatically.
Will they
no matter what. They'll prescribe them if you are like recovering from surgeries or stuff like that, and for short term. But they won't prescribe them for anything else.
You know, I was affected personally by the opiate crisis. It was like in the opiate capital of the world, I think. It was Huntington, West Virginia. It was even on John Oliver. And that whole thing with the opiates was caused by like CEOs, people at the very top who knew their medication was being abused and made that worse intentionally to try to sell more. And they got in a bunch of trouble for it. No one went to jail, I'm sure. You know how that works with, you know, rich people. But anyway, they kind of ruined it for everybody, didn't they?
This would be an appropriate use for opiates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a drug user. Not that I'm like trying to, you know, but like at least it would be an option to try.
Well, like I said, maybe try another doctor, see if another doctor has any input on it. Not saying you should be going around doctor shopping or anything, but it's always good to get two opinions at least, I figure. You think, Aron?
Especially with something like this, if your doctor can't even begin to prescribe something science-based, at least finding another doctor to see if they can broaden the possibility space is the best suggestion I can have, especially because, like I say, my medical knowledge is if your arm's broken, try to put it back in place. Otherwise, talk to a real doctor. That's my knowledge. My Boy Scout first aid training. That's as much as I can recommend.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, this is the best in the area, besides traveling for a while, but I guess I'm traveling for a while. Thank you for your advice.
Emily, one thing you could also do, because travel is an issue, many doctors are doing telemedicine.
It's true.
That's true. That's true. Maybe I can get a televisit instead.
Yeah, I think that would at least make things a lot easier if you can. Yeah, so if you can at least be in a comfy chair or couch at home and just be on Zoom with someone who can give you some options, that would be much better than traveling all over the state hoping.
Thank you. That's a good idea. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
We hope the best for you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I really do wish I could be more helpful in cases like that. You want to know about corks? Sure, I can talk your ear off. Know how to make the cork stop hurting in your body? That's something I wish I knew how to tell people.
I know, it's a challenge. My wife is in law school at the moment. She's almost done, has one semester left. Oh my God. And she was like a nurse originally, and I've come to find that like the differences in the professions are so dramatic. Like doctors deal with so much, it's crazy. I don't know who would want to be a doctor from all the stuff they have to deal with. Lawyer either, honestly. Law is like a nightmare.
Well, some people do love it. One of my cousins literally switched from being a jazz musician to a lawyer. And one, he's getting paid a whole lot better.
Right.
And two, he seems to enjoy what he does. So I know there's crazy hours with it, but you can at least get a home when you're done. If you're a jazz musician, 9 days or 7 days out of the week, you're waiting tables, and maybe you get a gig once in a while.
It's true. Yeah, my wife absolutely loves what she does too, and has worked for a bunch of people in the atheist sphere, American atheists and others. Public interest, like nonprofit organizations. They don't pay very well, but it's a job that most people enjoy the hell out of, you know?
We got to do our best to find what you love, so that way it feels like, it doesn't feel like a chore.
Absolutely. I love my job. Even the tedious stuff like editing. I could sit here all day and just edit. So once you find what you love doing, you'll never work another day in your life, as they say, right?
Yeah. Before we take our next call, I do have a few things in the script that I ought to be saying. So, again, remind you guys we're watching SkepTalk here on the line. We have a Patreon, so patreon.com/calltheline. Go there and give us some financial support. That way, folks like us hosting the show can eat when we're done. Upcoming shows. So we have a few different shows popping up soon. So tomorrow night is Chewed Gum with Arden Hart. I think she's going to have another guest, but it's not announced yet, so it'll be a special guest. The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty and Andrew Seidel will be on Wednesday night. This Thursday is the Transatlantic Call-In Show with Arden again and Josie. Then come Sunday, we got the Sunday Show with Eric of Skeptics and Scoundrels along with Forrest Valkai. That night as well, the Sunday After Dark also has Forrest Valkai and Matt Dillahunty. And next week's Monday's SkepTalk is again with Forrest along with Jesse Jurdick. So if you want Forrest, he's coming. There's a Forrest of Forrest coming.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wondering why I have so many terrible puns, it's one of the symptoms of being a physics teacher.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. We also have a podcast that's hosted by our good master of the show here, Jimmy Snow. If you become a Patreon, you will have good access to that podcast. Every episode, at least once a week, he calls another creator and has an impromptu discussion and then gives them a quiz, which, if they ace, they win a prize on behalf of a patron. So double incentive for
with
becoming
me,
a
matter of
Patreon
fact.
patron. Ah,
Yeah.
he has yet to abuse me. So any day now,
Mhm.
my phone is going to ring and it's going to somehow get past my spam filter.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows that I have a spam filter, so he messaged me, said, "Hey, can I call?" And I said, "Sure." So that's about as much notice as I had. It was pretty interesting, actually. I thought it's a really interesting idea. So check that out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm at least hoping if Jimmy calls me, it's not about sports because that patron is going to lose, unfortunately.
Right.
Other things about the podcast episodes go out to patrons first, and only patrons can win prizes and leave comments, which are read on air. Also, free patron and Discord. Only patrons, Patreon patrons, get the show 2 weeks later. So YouTube channel members get it on a delay. So there is a perk to being a YouTube channel member, but patrons get even more good stuff. All right, so 2 episodes are out so far with Apostasy and Eve Was Framed, and it's the greatest podcast alive. It's at least what the script says. And the script never lies. I read it on the internet. It's got to be true.
Right. Give it a shot at least.
Yeah. All right, so we got a couple of callers in queue. Oh, and we ready for another one?
We are.
Okay. Looks like actually one of our calls just dropped. So the one coming on right now is a theist from Mississippi, I believe. So bringing Jackie, pronouns he, him, coming on is a theist. Jackie, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys.
All right.
So basically, I would like to present the reason why, even from an atheistic, logical, rational point of view, you should still support the presence of a religious doctrine in society. So, are each of you guys familiar with George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel?
I don't think so.
I've heard of Hegel. When I've tried to read anything by him, I go, what the fuck is this? And that's even in the translated English, let alone the German.
So basically, Hegel was a German idealist, and he had some disagreements with Immanuel Kant, because Hegel had an idea of absolute idealism as compared to Kant's transcendental idealism. Basically, Hegel's idea is that reality is exposed. So technically, originally this idea first comes from Fichte, but Hegel developed upon Fichte's idea that reality is exposed when you get the synthesis of a contradicting antithesis and thesis. So basically, what I'm going to argue is that under this Hegelian dialectical logic, as atheists, the scientific, rationalist, atheist, scientific paradigm should support, logically, the presence of a religious paradigm under this logic, because if the atheistic, scientific, rationalist paradigm is the thesis, at the very least, you'd want an antithesis. That way, the synthesis will next present the broader truth.
Okay. Can you can you break it down again from a different perspective one more time, because it was a little bit hard to hear, and I just want to think about it for a second.
I mean, so basically, according to Hegel's understanding of Fichte, the truth of spirit is revealed when you have the synthesis of a thesis and an antithesis. And so if you guys believe in an atheistic, rationalist, scientific paradigm, you should support the antithesis of a religious paradigm. That way the synthesis will reveal a broader truth. So at the very least, you have a religious paradigm to counter the scientific thesis, right? This thesis and the antithesis under Hegelian logic produces the synthesis.
Okay, so let me just repeat it back to you, and you tell me if this is right. You're saying, in effect, that religion should exist because if it didn't exist, then what?
Because if it didn't exist, there'd be no antithesis in the dialectic to respond to the thesis that is scientific, rationalistic, atheistic paradigm, and so therefore there would be no synthesis.
Okay, so you're saying
you need an antithesis to have a synthesis.
Okay, now my understanding, though, for this to work well, so the idea of that this, you have thesis, you have an antithesis, they're in conflict, and by resolving it, you get to the synthesis, and you've advanced forward in knowledge. Thing, though, you have to have a reason to believe both the thesis and the antithesis have some level of truth to it. If you have something that's true and something demonstrably false, there's nothing to dialogue about. One of these is false. Conversation's done. The only reason you would even go for the synthesis is you have reasons to think both things are true, but they're in conflict.
Well, to my understanding of the Hegelian definition of truth, there is no absolute truth, and therefore, it necessarily you create an antithesis in order to get a synthesis, because that is logical progression. Now, personally, I'm not a Hegelian. I disagree with the Hegelian dialectics. This is for atheists. This is using the atheist logic.
Well, as you might have noticed, Owen isn't a Hegelian, at least not knowingly. I don't proffer up talking about the master-slave relationships that Hegel had as well, nor am I a Marxist, who, as I understand, Hegel also was a big influence on Marx, etc. And also,
not all Hegelians are Marxists.
Right.
No.
There were left Hegelians, right Hegelians. It's almost like he was really fucking hard to interpret, and everyone took him every way they wanted to, which happens when you're not a very good writer, which is my best opinion of him right now, is he's at least not clear. But the important thing is, the whole reason we even have a synthesis is that you see some value in both things and you're trying to parse out what can actually fit together. If two things are opposed and one of them has no good reason to believe it, it should just be thrown out, because to do a reductio ad absurdum, should we also promote astronomy and astrology because they're opposed and it moves forward the dialectic? Does also promoting astrology actually help create a better astronomy?
Well, I don't believe in a linear progression of time with the dialectical process. I don't agree with the Hegelian thesis.
Then why should we?
Because I'm using what I thought was what most atheists had the paradigm of.
Again, I think most atheists don't even know anything about Hegel, let alone constantly go with his way of understanding the world. I mean, Hegel himself wasn't an atheist, is my understanding.
Yeah, he was a Lutheran.
Where was he from? Germany or Russia? Germany?
He was a German.
Okay.
Or, well, pre-Germany, because you didn't have Germany proper until like the 1870s, but a German-speaking country.
Okay. Well, do you guys believe that religious values have a necessary value in explaining or providing metaphysical axiom to that which is unknown? Do you believe there's any explanatory value of religious doctrine? If not Christian doctrine, at least general theistic doctrine.
I will say that anything that appears to be true in religion is grounded in what makes it true outside of religion. There's some secular reason to believe it, and if you don't have a reason to believe it, it doesn't matter if it's religious or not. Basically, it's almost like the Euthyphro dilemma. Is it that religion says that because it's good, or is it good because religion says that? If it's the latter, then it's just following orders. If it's the former, then we don't need religion to tell us what's good or not. We have some other means of knowing what's good and right. In which case, what's religion doing other than kind of making it more difficult to have the conversations, because it turns into dogma.
I mean, do you not believe that what explains the order that emerges from chaos, right? The order that comes from the tohu vavohu. You don't think religion offers an explanation there that currently scientists have not created the proper paradigm for?
Well, the thing is, using a couple Hebrew words doesn't actually explain that. All it basically says is Magic Man blew and separated things out because he just blew that hard, because that's what the Spirit of God is. It's literally the breath of God separating out and trying to create order from that chaos, which, by the way, isn't even so much original to Genesis 1, because you find similar ideas in the theogony of Hesiod. So why not just be a Greek religious believer and go with the pantheon of Zeus and the Titans and all that instead? And if you want a scientific explanation, second law of thermodynamics pretty much well explains how we get even orderly systems out of apparent disorder.
my understanding, correct me if this is wrong, but the second law of thermodynamics is that energy cannot be created or destroyed, or do I have that wrong?
That's basically the first law of thermodynamics, or conservation of energy. The second law is about the increase of entropy over time, and in particular, you will get all sorts of interesting energy flow if there is a differential energy in two places. So especially here on Earth, we have this nice energy source we call the sun, and it helps drive all sorts of interesting processes here on Earth, everything from weather to ultimately life. So we don't need the breath of God to come in. We can tell pretty well how things move, and we don't see Magic Man done it as helping.
Yeah, but I mean, before the cosmos was iterated, there's no way to detect what the rest of natural reality is contingent upon, or at least not that I'm understanding. There might be some astrophysicists working on a paper like that somewhere, but I haven't heard, like, to my understanding, that's still a current mystery that the scientific paradigm is trying to explore.
Mystery, yes, but as you say, there are lots of people working on it. There are lots of possible models that could have it so the universe has always existed in some form or the other, so there's never some point where the universe comes from nothing. Or there's models that allow it that the universe can exist from nothing, because the interesting thing is, do you know how much energy there is in the entire universe if we added up all the energy in the entire universe?
No, I don't know that statistic off the top of my head.
Well, the funny thing is that it's within our error measurements, it's about zero. There's just as much positive as there is negative energy. So in total, we have zero. So how much energy does it take to start a universe? Apparently none.
Oh, okay. Well, I understand. So is what you're saying that it's possible for there to have been nothing, and then positive and negative energy came out of nothing?
It's one model of that exists out there. I'm not saying it's the correct model, but one of the models is basically tunneling from a seeming nothingness to giving what we have here. Or what might seem conceptually easier to accept is that there's always been some kind of universe. If you go even before the Big Bang, that there was something from which we could say that we emerged from. Most models of cosmic inflation basically suggest it can go back pretty much as far back as you would like it to go. It doesn't necessarily need some time zero starting point, and we also have plenty of unknowns because we don't have the ultimate theory of gravity, a quantum theory of gravity that might also help direct us and understand what happens at the earliest moments of our observable universe and what's possible before such an observable universe, if that's even a coherent idea. Basically, yes, we have unknowns, and the thing is, if you throw God into it, then you have to ask, well, how did God do it? And it's worth noting, if you go back to that tohu vohu in Genesis, you will need to note that what God does is he does not create from nothing. There was already stuff there, and he started organizing it. So you have to ask, where did the stuff come from? And Genesis 1 fails to answer that, and makes you realize, hey, maybe this book of mythology doesn't actually help explain quantum physics or cosmology all that well.
I understand. Well, to my saying, there are different cosmogonic models, but either way, whatever the religious cosmogonic model says is that God willed there be order. So,
not in the physics papers I'm reading. If I go onto the physics archives, the number of times God shows up is a pretty small number.
well, let's talk about the religious cosmology, but I don't know what the current current physicists are working on theories of cosmology.
Well, there's lots of them, and they're producing papers all the time. I mentioned the physics archive. So arxiv.org. That is literally a physics preprint website. So a lot of physicists will publish their thing there before it may go into a peer-reviewed journal, and the price to access those articles is zero. All you have to do is go and search for them. And you will see in the cosmology section at the archives, there are papers published there every single day by people who are trying to push forward the frontiers, either in terms of experimental data, observational data, or in terms of theoretical work. And, well, we're definitely all trying very hard to learn more and more. I wish I were doing more to contribute to that personally, but you will go there and say, hey, there's a bunch of people here who know what they're talking about, advancing the field, and the number of times Hebrew phrases show up in those papers is pretty much zero.
And you know what? If that stuff, if people want to research that, that's great. I'm so down for people researching, God's effect on the universe and his presence and everything. But if it's a dead end, then it's a dead end. That's it. If it's a scientific dead end. And if it's just if it's not scientifically proven, then okay. But, it doesn't belong in science in that case, right?
I understand. I think the question of God is more metaphysical and philosophical. But I think before we wrap up here, Aaron, do you know of any physicists I could look up who currently are working on theories of cosmology that you would recommend?
Whew. So, in terms of recommendations, I would also want to recommend someone who, one, has contributed to the field, and two, is also trying to communicate publicly well. So Sean Carroll immediately jumps to mind. So he and one of his students, Chen and Carroll, they had a paper that actually has a model where basically at the Big Bang, you have two universes with time going in opposite directions, which helps not only explain the arrow of time from the second law of thermodynamics, but also throws out away the need to explain what comes before the Big Bang, because there was always something before then as well. And so far as I know, there is no evidence against that model, though also no direct evidence for it either. So it's ultimately theoretically interesting and plausible. Lee Smolin is another person who comes to mind. He's particularly worked on an idea of basically black holes create universes, and this actually also creates a selection effect that universes that create more black holes are more selected for because they produce more universes, and the universes that produce more black holes also happen to produce the things that we need to have life. So it's a really interesting approach that he has. If you want something a little bit more colloquial, Lee Smolin, Smolin, Smolin.
Okay. I'll check him out. I do know. Yeah. I actually do know who Sean Carroll is, but I'm not as familiar with his research because I've seen him on, I think, the Joe Rogan podcast or something like that. But I don't exactly remember what he was talking about.
Yeah. Well, he also has his own podcast. He's a professor at Caltech, and he should probably be least known for being on Joe Rogan because the guest quality on Joe Rogan is not something I would esteem for personally.
Okay. So I think you said Sean Carroll, Lee Carroll, or Chen Carroll?
Lee Smolin. Chen was one of Sean Carroll's students. I forget Chen's first name. I just remember the paper as Chen and Carroll. 2006, if memory serves, but don't quote me on that. Also, just on YouTube, the channel Skydive Phil, I think they might have changed their name, but they have a whole lot of physicists they go and personally interview and talk about, here are all the different models that are actively being pursued in physics and cosmology right now to explain where the universe comes from, and also to show how, in particular, William Lane Craig is wrong about everything he says about cosmology and philosophy related to that. Okay, I think I'll check that out. Well, I don't have much more to say, and I'll think if about calling in the future. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Good times, good times?
Yeah, it was interesting. Didn't expect that talk to come in.
I was definitely not expecting of jumping from Hegel to Hebrew to cosmology models to YouTube recommendations.
Right. Yeah, I had never heard of Hegel, surprisingly. I looked into him. I think he's from 1790 or something. Yeah, I've been researching that area and time frame pretty heavily. Germanic states were there, but they were controlled by, I believe, the Holy Roman Empire at the time.
It went back and forth, and I think a fair number of those regions also were controlled by France for a while during the Napoleonic days, so it complicated.
Yeah.
I also remember just the only thing of interest for what I kind of study when it comes to Hegel, because I also do a fair bit of biblical studies. One of the really founding figures for like modern New Testament studies was a student of Hegel, but like a student of Hegel for like a couple weeks, and then Hegel decided to die, unfortunately.
Okay.
And that
People do
was yeah. And that was Strauss, David Friedrich Strauss, who wrote this book in 1825 called "The Life of Jesus Critically Examined," and basically it's the first like at length book to basically say, here are these stories of Jesus. Here's the attempts for people to try to pretend they're historical. Here's why it's a bunch of bunk. And ultimately, we need to use the 4-letter word to describe what it is: myth.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. And because it was the 1820s, in relatively conservative parts of Germany, they're like, yeah, you're not a professor here anymore. Get the hell out of here.
Right.
But everyone else was like, but damn it, he's right. So it's not that all of his conclusions are still held today, but everyone is just like, this is the turning point in New Testament studies. And it was a short-term student of Hegel.
Okay, and Hegel was a Lutheran, I believe. That would check out because there were a lot of Lutherans in the area and the time frame. The other one in the area, aside from Catholicism, of course, was a Reformed Church, a Calvinist sect, but it was almost entirely Lutheran in those states.
Yeah, and with the 30 Years' War, a lot of it was also, you get to choose a religion, or we choose for you really badly.
Yep, that's true.
You better choose right.
The 1555 Treaty of Augsgrad, I think, also, basically said, if you, the people will be whatever religion the leader is, pretty much.
Yeah. And if you're not willing to follow, you might have to be like Kepler and get out of town. So Johannes Kepler, a famous astronomer, was a unorthodox Lutheran, because he would basically like listen to the Catholics and be like, they're actually right about things, and the Calvinists are right about things, and everyone was willing to talk to him, but politically that was no bueno, and you definitely can't say no bueno in a German country, so he had to be moving all the time.
It's interesting. What year was he around, roughly? Do you know?
Early 1600s. I think he died 1630s, more or less. Yeah. And of course corresponded with Galileo. And the reason we have like our laws of planetary motion all go back to him.
Right. That's fascinating. I've been doing a lot of research into Germany in the 17, 18, and 1900s to try to understand religion in the region at the time, because of, I don't know about you, but I have heard basically zero about Christianity, Protestant Christianity in Germany during World War II, except to hear people say that Hitler was an atheist and he was breeding atheists and everyone was an atheist in the area and atheists are evil and so on and so forth. So you wouldn't believe the trouble I've had finding information on it. And I finally came across this book that is in literally no libraries in New York City but one, and it's a private legal library that the public can't access. So I bought it for like $120 off of Amazon. Again, only one copy was available at the time, but it goes into the whole German church. Super fascinating stuff.
Can you show the book again?
Also reminds me of
It's called And the Witnesses Were Silent by Wolfgang Gerlach, right here. It was published in 1987 or something, and it was translated by Victoria Barnett in between 1987 and 2000, I believe, and it was released by Nebraska Press, but they're not producing new copies. It's not available digitally. It's almost non-existent, this book is, and the subject is almost non-existent. So I'm writing a book about it right now, and I'm hoping to find some way to like reproduce this book. I contacted the publisher, asked for permission to like make an audiobook or whatever, but they're not responding, so we'll see.
Darn. Also reminds me, actually, there's I do not remember the name of the historian, but he did a really deep dive into the only source that people point to showing Hitler was an atheist, the Table Talk of Hitler. And basically there's this long history that the English translation of the Table Talk is actually based on French, and the French was actually made different on purpose by that translator, by someone who basically was found out to be a hack. And the table talk itself is ultimately, even the German isn't reliable because you're not going to believe this, but Nazis are liars.
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so I think the book is called Table Talk Redux, something like that. But basically, this historian from, I think, Sweden, I do not know for sure, but did all like the really hard groundwork, talking to witnesses, finding sources, and basically finding out that pretty much everything about this table talk is immensely unreliable, and it should not be ever so easily used as a source for anything about Hitler.
Absolutely fascinating. Yeah. I think that I've found like a total of maybe 3 books that talk about the Protestant church in Germany during World War II or the lead up to it that are not biased as all hell. And from the sources that I've read, I personally I don't know. I think Hitler was like Trump in that he constantly talked about religion, but personally secretly, he didn't really believe it, it seems to me. But there's nearly zero evidence that he, was not a Christian. He was raised Catholic, of course, and all that.
Mm. I also remember one other book. It's somewhere on my bookshelf back here. It's one of the books that was edited together by John Loftus, and it has a chapter in there by the late Hector Avalos about the religion in Nazi Germany and what was called positive Christianity, which was a extra anti-Semitic version of Christianity, which somehow even made Jesus not a Jew. They like the story that Jesus's mother Mary was raped by a Roman soldier. The Nazis were like, yeah, we'll take that because that makes Jesus white.
Yep. Oh, dude, I'm telling you, I have had my head in this area of study for the past 3 weeks, very heavily, but for the past 6 months to a year, not quite as heavily. And yeah, I could talk about this for like hours. You could talk about physics for hours. I could talk about this. Super fascinating. I know where it started and everything.
Yeah, and I quickly looked up the book I was mentioning. It's called Hitler Redux, The Incredible History of Hitler's So-Called Table Talk by Mikael Nilsson. He's from Sweden, published by Routledge, available on Amazon if you want to buy that. But of course, before you buy that, make sure you have donated to our Patreon first.
There you go. And what was the name of it too? Is Mikael Nilsson, produced by Routledge, Table Talk Redux, The Incredible what?
Hitler Redux, The Incredible Story of Hitler's So-Called Table Talks.
Okay, I'm going to check that out. That sounds really interesting.
And there is a digital version of that, so you can actually get it on Kindle. So there you go.
Perfect. Yeah, finding unbiased information in this area of study is ridiculous. Right now, actually, you know the Sound of Freedom movie? You know of that?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, it had like Caviezel in it. Well, anyway, the studio that produced it was called Angel Studios. They are now producing a new movie called Bonhoeffer. And I'm telling you, this dude is the most lied about guy in history, aside from, a very few. He was the leader of the oppositional church in Germany opposed to Hitler. And people made all kinds of crazy claims about him that were not true. Like he assisted or orchestrated this assassination attempt against Hitler and everything. He didn't. He had nothing to do with that. He was in jail when that happened, Oh my God. I know it's going to piss me off, that movie. I'm going to review the whole thing when it comes out in November.
I'm betting it's going to be based on the book by Eric Metaxas because he wrote a Bonhoeffer book that got panned. But Metaxas is such a right-wing religious nut that I'm pretty sure that's going to be the source, all things considered. But I think when it comes to sources, I should look into our source of calls because we do have a few callers in queue. So we have a pantheist that we can bring on. So let me bring on Big D, pronouns he, him, coming in from Missouri or Missouri, depending on which side of the river he's on. Big D, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. So,
what do you want to talk about, sir?
Well, I'm a former evangelical or ex-evangelical, and after leaving that, recently I started doing transcendental meditation, and Maharishi Yoga talks about the unified field theory. So, through meditation, and I just wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on that. I don't have strong conviction about pantheism. So I go back and forth between atheism and pantheism.
I think you cut out for a second, but you're wondering our thoughts on transcendental meditation, right?
Yeah, and the idea that the founder, Maharishi, claims that you can dip into that through meditation and experience what they call unity consciousness. So it's like you feel like you're sort of one with everything, basically. And I'm wondering, like, from a scientific point of view, if the unified field theory, string theory, starts to get really kind of wacky sounding, or again, people, there's like that Dancing Louis Masters book. People are saying you can sort of that modern physics kind of supports this kind of pantheistic worldview. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
All right, so I'll address some of the physics-related stuff. The unified field theory stuff, if that is true, is still being worked out. Specifically in physics, when we talk about a unified field theory, we're talking about we have these different forces that are described by quantum fields, and is there some way that there could be some higher theory that can explain both or all of the different force fields out there? And the most popular forms of field theories out there that it could explain the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism are called grand unified theories, or GUTS. And unfortunately, as of right now, we have not been able to do experiments that confirm any gut theories. And more, we've had many a gut theory, have its guts torn apart because they make predictions that we've been able to falsify. So at least limitations on certain versions of it. As of right now, we don't have a gut that is confirmed as of yet, and the ones that aren't, that are still around, have predictions that are just outside of our ability to test, in a similar way that supersymmetric theories, that string theories based on certain versions of that have been disproven, but for every physicist, they have their own version of beyond the standard model of particle physics that hasn't yet been disproven. And when everyone has a different theory and they all have one thing in common, that there's no evidence for it, you got to wonder and say, what do we got here, guys? What's going on here? That's unfortunately the situation. So we can't go from that. But even if we had a working grand unified theory, do you notice any of the effects that would have outside of what we have in our normal everyday experience? Your brain would have to become a particle accelerator with energy levels billions of times greater than what the chemical reactions in your brain are capable of. So no matter how hard you meditate, no matter how hot you can make your head in a meditation process, you are not going to get to 20 tera electron volt collisions of particles in your brain. You are not going to notice anything from higher dimensions in physics that sort of way. At least there's nothing in physics that comports to that.
Okay, so you think that is a bogus claim, and that what do you think people are when they have when they have like a mystical experience or enlightenment? What do you think is going on in the brain that would make people feel like they're connected to everything and less of the constricted self? I mean, it sounds like you're saying that the attempt to link those mystical experiences to physics is probably baloney, or at least something we don't know about yet.
Owen, how you can take this?
Yeah. I think that our brain interprets information in a specific way, and sometimes chemicals in your brain can kind of change the way that is interpreted. I know of people who have taken hallucinogens and had incredible experiences that were just inexplicable, or, ego death, or I know of people who have had near-death experiences who felt that they were like, out of their body and seeing their body and going toward a light, and there was like a guide there with them and everything. But those things have been tested and been found to just be false. Like, that didn't happen. I think they famously they put like don't quote me on this. There was a case where a woman claimed to have an out-of-body experience, and there was a shoe on the roof of the hospital, and they asked her about it, and she had no idea there was a shoe. Like, she believed probably to the bottom of her heart that this happened, but it did not. It just didn't. So your brain is interpreting all kinds of different things, but and we can prove that we're interpreting all kinds of things, but we can't prove that any of those things are anywhere except inside of our heads. That's my take.
Okay. So, yeah, I wonder if there's like a shift in the default mode network or something that might cause those changes in perception, or I guess when you think about psychedelics and the crazy experiences people have on that, you could say, well, lifelong meditators who are in a mystical experience all the time, or have had brain changes that make them delusional, or almost lucid in just time.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could say that, but I'm not sure like what these people are claiming to experience. Have you ever heard of synesthesia before? Do you know what that is?
The mixing of the senses.
Yeah. People will like interpret smells through like their vision or something. It's extremely uncommon, bizarre condition, but our brain has all kinds of different modes and experiences and chemicals and everything. It is such a ridiculously complex thing that we don't understand as humans, like, fully yet. People always doing research on this. And before, if people are going to make claims about like extra dimensions or a connection to some other thing, the universe or whatever, I'm going to need some kind of empirical anything, something beyond just their feelings on the subject. Because, yeah, I just feel like it comes down to science. And if it's not something science can measure, then it's just not something provable as far as I'm concerned. I want to believe as many true things as possible, as few false things as possible. So, yeah.
Okay. So, I think what happened, I stayed up all night doing transcendental meditation. I mean, because I have bad insomnia anyway, so I just decided to meditate all night. And I was a little bit stoned, actually. But what happened to me is that after maybe 2 hours or so, I didn't feel my body in any kind of as any way separate from like the air around me and the
You keep cutting out there for just a split second. So you said you didn't feel your body disconnected from the air?
right, like, and that makes me, with sort of the normal everyday perception, we don't think of the air around us as as an object. Like we think that, okay, there's my TV across the room, and that's obviously separate from me physically. But if the air is full of molecules and stuff, it's not a void, right? So aren't we just
I'm sorry, you cut out
on
again.
a particle?
You said
Yeah,
it's not a void, so aren't we just what?
Okay, so the air is not empty around us.
Right.
Then it's full of molecules, and those molecules are the same, basically, that are inside of this and in another object across the room. So on a counterintuitive, but on some level, aren't these?
We lost him again for a split second.
Yeah, my the screen keeps closing. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So yeah, the idea that
unfortunately,
the idea that the air, we are continuous with everything because the air is made up of molecules and we're made up of molecules, and we have this body that makes us feel like we're solid and separate. But on some level, aren't we really all connected? Because there's no the molecules are everywhere, and we're part of that soup.
What do you think? Do you have input on that? It sounds like it's up your alley. I have input if you want me to go.
I mean, you could talk about connected in that sort of way, but it is still the case that there is something with my body that separates it from everything else, that there is a clear delineation between what's inside and outside. And if you doubt it, if my insides were outside, it would be very affecting of me. So to a degree, we can talk about that we are connected because we share the air. If there's something I do to this air around me, it can go travel out and affect other people, whether that's I'm spreading a virus or I buy 10 diesel engines and just start blaring them so I can increase global warming because I just love hot summers. I can be connected in that sort of way, even though that would be pretty antisocial of me. But I would still say, even with that level of connection, it's still the case there is clearly a difference between what is me and what is separate from me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. It's just on that occasion where I was meditating all night, and part of it is just because you're not moving, so you don't you sort of lose the sensation that your body. I mean, you're not feeling any sensations on your skin, so for me, it just kind of expanded out into this feeling of connection with everything. So I think maybe just the losing of the bodily sensations that would make us recognize that we have a body distinct from the air or the particles in the air around us.
What do you think?
So I guess from a pragmatic point of view, I sort of find that sorry, you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's really pantheism or because you can say, well, okay, we are connected with everything, but that doesn't make that everything divine in any way. It's just just a scientific or experiential, feeling.
Right.
I would say that the issue I have with the pantheist idea to basically make God synonymous with everything is, how does that make everything different if it were or were not God? Because if it works the exact same way, if it still walks like a duck, talks like a duck, smells like a duck, attacks me like a duck, saying it's a divine duck underneath didn't seem to change much of anything. So we can
Right.
talk about like how we can say we share, for example, the same reality. We share in the same ultimate quantum fields, but ultimately those quantum fields are brainless numbers that are pushing things around rather than conscious minds. And so giving it a divine attribute doesn't seem to add anything, in my opinion. And we can give things value without it being blessed by the Almighty of sorts.
Right. So I guess that it would come down to a kind of epistemological pragmatism or something, where, for me, I find it helpful to believe in this kind of noble lie, I guess, that the kind of a pantheistic view, even though I probably it is an identical thing, that if the supernatural world and the natural world are the same thing, you might as well just call it the natural world, I guess. But somehow, I guess just the idea that we're all connected on some level that's not immediately perceptible to us. I guess I just think that idea is better than just a purely scientific, rational one, just simply because if I see if there's a kind of a unified consciousness, and I would see you as me. Jesus talks about love your neighbor as yourself. So on a more like mystical interpretation of that would be like, you guys are just aspects of me and I'm aspects of you. So we're just really talking to ourselves here. You're talking to me, but you're talking to yourself and everybody else. So
interesting idea.
when I think of other people as somehow part of me, it makes it more interesting, I guess.
Right.
It makes it
that it is an interesting idea, although I can't say that there are a lot of things that I would like to believe, but I just can't. I would like to believe that there's something beyond death, for example. I just like either it's true or it's not true, and I haven't seen any evidence of its truth yet. When I do, I will believe it like that. But I want to believe as many true things as possible, as few false things as possible. And in that spirit, I'm just going to, I'm going to kind of stick to where I am. That's my perspective on it. But if there is any evidence of any of that, I'm willing to accept it. That being said, we are all connected in some way. I mean, not on like a metaphysical realm, but I'm a human and you're a human and everybody else that we talk to is a human mostly. 90% of the time. And we all have similar experiences and we can all understand morality and things like that. So there is a connection just through our shared experience, if nothing else, I figure.
And we definitely do affect each other. Again, if even not at a metaphysical level, we interact with each other, whether in person, digitally, we affect each other. That connection is real. We don't need new physics to say that that is true. We know we affect each other, and we can also say that reciprocating good intent is a way to make things better. We don't need Jesus or mysticism to make that true. We can get that just from game theory. So we can do some math and science for this, but just realize, if we're good to other people, it actually makes the world better in general.
Sure. I guess that, I think, in the past, I had kind of a tendency towards solipsism, or kind of feeling like the only thing that's relevant is, inside me, or the thoughts I would have, and I would have trouble paying attention to other people. or feeling connected with them. So it helps me to kind of think about, if I think about, if they're part of this kind of uber self, then I would be, less inclined to hurt someone if there were another aspect of me, because I'd be hurting myself.
I see. So it's like an extension of solipsism.
Maybe it is. But it's not so much that they don't, that they don't exist, other people and the, objects and animals and stuff. It's that we're all, I don't know, I guess it just kind of falls apart. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Anyway.
Scientifically it falls apart, but we are all connected in like a shared experience kind of way. So you can kind of connect with that. Like I said, yeah, solipsism is not provable or disprovable, obviously, but so I'm just gonna go with the information that I have and that I'm being fed in the moment, and just do everything that I can with what I have, basically,
Okay. Well, that's pretty cool, guys. I don't, maybe you want to move on to debating with real theists.
Yeah. That was interesting.
We do have some other callers to get to, but I don't think we're going to have enough fire with the upcoming calls. But who knows? If I get a couple adult beverages, we might change that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a good one.
You too.
All right. So I see that we have a few more calls. They appear to all be atheists in the queue, but I would like to get to them since they've been waiting patiently. So let's hop up Roy. Roy from South Carolina, atheist. Pronouns are he, him. Roy, how are you doing?
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So my question was, how do you define the supernatural? Because it's not clear to me what that means. Yeah. If you want to maybe say something before I elaborate, up to you, or I can continue on what I think is the definition.
I'll just say quickly that very often the way supernatural gets defined is not natural, which feels question begging. And I would agree with theists who would say that's a terrible definition. So, how do you like to address the problem, Roy?
Yeah. So I like to think of it as, let me describe maybe something that I understand. For example, if I made a book, and in that book I created characters, I wrote it in a certain literary style and all that, and gave it to someone else, and they took that book and they explored it, maybe they would discover laws about that book, that every sentence ends in a punctuation, every next sentence starts with a capital letter, things like that. And they could give these laws names because they have predictive value. But whatever they investigate about that book, it cannot really tell them about the higher order question of who made the book, who put the book there, what's the nature of the book. So for me, that's what the supernatural feels like. When you're talking about this universe, the supernatural has to be the analog to this book that you really cannot investigate from within the universe.
Okay, interesting. Well, like I said with the other call, if I can't investigate it, if I can't even know for sure that it exists at all, then I'm just going to err on the side of caution and wait for evidence of its existence, So I've always said, like, is magic real? The answer is, in my opinion, no. And I know that because the military would have weaponized it a long time ago. If we could reproduce if we could like prove any of this stuff or anything at all, it would change people's minds, including myself, instantly. But currently, it feels like the supernatural worlds, the way that it's being described here, is kind of like Muslims claim about, I don't know, whatever things they claim. It's like Hindus claims about things, or Catholics, or any other group of people. I have no reason to believe that there's like a pink dragon in my house. So I'm just not going to believe that until I have some kind of anything at all to think it might be true,
Okay. So a pink dragon, maybe there's a particular combination of organic molecules that could result in a pink dragon somewhere outside the Oort cloud, right? So that doesn't necessarily qualify as supernatural to me. It just qualifies as absurd. So
interesting. Okay.
I'm only really trying to get at how do you even talk about something supernatural, and what possibly could be any investigative tool that we could utilize to detect its presence.
So
One way I could think about.
Go ahead.
One way I could think about is going back to the book analogy. If I made the book, I could somehow write within the book to the characters in the book properties about myself and claim that they knew me like that. And so a way that in our universe a god could be investigated is if you collected all the religious texts and they were all to the T consistent. To me, that would be somewhat okay as evidences. Okay, that this person must be revealing themselves this way, or person or entity or whatever.
Okay, interesting. So, what if we know that one of those groups started the book, and then all of the other books were based on the one that was originally started by this one set of people? Would that change your mind? So it's all down to one source.
Yeah, that would change my mind. I think the method that I provided is definitely not foolproof. I was just trying to think of an example of how you could possibly investigate the supernatural. The scenario that you put forward definitely would invalidate that. Yeah.
Well, of course, we have Judaism, which was the source of Islam and Christianity. And that's, 90% of the world or something. I don't know, maybe 70%. All of these other religions are very, very different from each other. And I don't think I've heard the argument that they're all coming to similar conclusions, but, I don't even feel that they are. I feel like Buddhism is so completely different from Christianity that they're not even really comparable to each other at all. So I feel like it's kind of what is it? Is it a selection bias where we're looking at things that look similar, so we assume that there's a pattern there? I don't know, maybe not selection bias. I don't know. Is there a word for schmoobly-gong? Feels right? I don't know if that's it.
I doubt that word is in the scientific literature right now.
Anyway, any thoughts on it?
So
no. Okay. Yeah.
I was going to say that one of the things with the analogy of the book and noticing like all the regularities in it, if you in a scientific law sort of sense, it should be the case that you can't even possibly write a book without those punctuation laws being followed. So things would be a bit more interesting. You would notice, hey, there's all these interesting correlations. But if you tried writing a sentence and then just like in the movie Liar Liar, that you just literally can't write anything false, that you can't write without a sentence ending in a period, you can't write a sentence without it starting capitalized. No matter how hard you tried, you'd say, oh, wow, there is really something going on here, rather than just noticing this is a regularity that we've noticed. And that's part of the scientific method, that we go out and test things and say, hey, this sort of thing seems to be the case. Let's find ways to disprove that correlation. So that's one thing that makes science different than just the correlations that are described there. But even so, one of the ideas that I've seen that kind of helps me differentiate between the natural and the supernatural is that the supernatural seems to be fundamentally mental, that there's like a mind involved, and you can't break it down into something that is not mental. So ultimately, my thought is the stuff that's going on inside of me that I consider my mental world ultimately comes down to atoms doing weird stuff. Owen here, I think it's the same thing happening in his brain. There isn't something indivisibly mental going on in there. So that would be my idea of what you'd expect if there really were supernatural things. They'd be things floating around that if you looked as carefully as possible, you wouldn't actually find corks inside doing things. You would find that fundamentally it's something mental going on. And in a sense, the people who do psychic research are the ones doing the most to try to show that that's real. And the fact that ultimately their science sucks kind of shows that it's not there.
Okay. I think that's all I have. I have one more, maybe side but related question on. It's interesting something you said earlier about your brain would have to have some kind of high energy level to detect particles unknown. That's how I interpreted it. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but so let's imagine for right now, string theory was proven, and somebody asked about an object in space or space-time, whatever it is. Right now, because you have 4 dimensions that we know of, you can say that an object has certain volume, physical properties, and the time and space is warped in certain ways around that object. But if you had now 11 dimensions, the description of this object would get pretty intractable. And also, we routinely seem to omit when it's inconvenient to keep track of all these things. For example, if I ask you, how old are you? You don't say 5 billion years old, even though there's actually part of the accretion disk from the solar system formation that's actually probably made it into your body. Things like that. So let's imagine for a second that we had very high technology tools. What would be the limits of what we could investigate? Because if we are fundamentally limited even in natural investigation, I cannot possibly think to investigate anything like a supernatural.
So it feels like there's a few things in there, but just very quickly, even if string theory is right, the effects that would have will be so minute for day-to-day things and even for most cosmic things that it would not change our observations at all. The first string theory book I had gone through, Baby's first string theory book, and by baby's first, I mean like first-year graduate student, but nonetheless, it shows like, here's the basic particle in a box. If you add an extra spatial dimension, it ever so slightly tweaks the result to such a level that you probably wouldn't even notice. So basically, even if string theory is true, we're not really changing like how we understand day-to-day life at all, honestly. The reason we haven't detected string theory being true is that if it has any effects, it is so difficult to detect them, it definitely can't be part of our natural day-to-day experience. I kind of lost track with the rest of the things, so I feel like I don't know if I fully answered what you wanted.
No, I think, that's enough for me to think about,
Okay. All right. So I'm going to let you go, Roy, and I hope you have an excellent night. And make sure you don't get too close to that leaf blower I was hearing in the background.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
I was thinking either a lathe or a vacuum.
It's definitely sounded more like a vacuum motor, and whether it was on suck or blow, I guess it depends on which scene in Spaceballs you happen to be watching.
Right, I love that movie. God, I haven't heard a Spaceballs reference in so many years.
I was watching clips of Spaceballs on YouTube just a couple weeks ago, so it's back in my brain, bringing back some good old nostalgic memories.
Yeah, I watched that with my dad when I was younger. It's super funny. Mel Brooks is really good.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. All right. Speaking of good, we got one more call in the queue, so let's bring in Albert from Guatemala. He's an atheist, pronouns he, him. Albert, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hello,
yes,
we hear
can
you.
Yeah, all right. Hi, hey, how are you guys?
Doing well.
Good.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I'm a science enthusiast, let's say, or yeah, I don't have any titles or anything, but I like to learn a lot. And I wanted to run one idea by you. And this is my case for faster than light information, sending information faster than light. All right. So as I understand, quantum entangled particles can be in certain states, so they can be unmeasured, right? Or they can be measured up and down. Is that correct?
The particles will be entangled up until you measure them, and then that will usually break entanglement.
All right, but you can, yeah, so there's an experiment by John Bell, I think, that tells you, okay, this wasn't measured. That's how they noticed, yeah, the particles are on this fuzzy state until they are measured, right?
So specifically, what it sounds like you're referring to is Bell's theorem or Bell's inequality. He didn't do the experiment, but he basically did the math to distinguish two different possible ways of interpreting quantum mechanics. Basically, is it that in quantum mechanics that entangled particles can actually have these correlations across great distances, or is there some sort of underlying hidden variable that actually drives the results? So between a hidden variable theory of quantum mechanics versus standard quantum mechanics, there's no hidden variables. It's, as Einstein called it, spooky action at a distance. And Bell worked out the math in the 70s, and the Nobel Prize on this sort of work was actually just given 2 years ago, and basically saying it's spooky. It's not the hidden variables. At least hidden variables seems to be strongly disconfirmed, and it looks like quantum mechanics is as spooky as it appears to be.
Right, correct. So yeah, the particles aren't measured until you measure them, and that they are either up or down, right? All right. So yeah. So here's how you communicate information. You take a bunch of particles, and yeah, you need to agree on a protocol, right? And you take a bunch of particles from Earth to the other end of the universe, right? So really far, as far as you want, and you have like a set of particles that are going to let you that you can check if they were you can check if they were measured or not, right? So you have a set of particles to know if a message has been sent, right? So
how do you check the particle was measured if you don't measure the particle itself?
With isn't that Bell's experiment that you can check?
So the whole thing with Bell's inequality is about it's specifically about entangled particles, so that two particles will basically share a quantum number property, so that for example, this is usually given with the idea of a quantum spin, that you can imagine, well, it's not a perfect picture, but that particles can either be spinning up or spinning down in your measurement apparatus. And if two particles are entangled, then if you measure one as spin up, you know instantly the other one is spin down. Correct. That's the sort of entanglement that's being described there.
Yeah, but can you know with and this is probably my issues here. Can you know if the particle was measured or not with an
You
experiment?
won't be able to know that until you look. And that's the problem. You have to basically know when to look to see that it has been measured. But that means somebody had to have given you that information otherwise. And unfortunately, that information was sent to you at the speed of light.
Right. But my question is then, can you measure it and know if it was measured or not by somebody else, or can you not know that?
You won't be able to know that either without looking or without being told. And in the latter case of being told, that means somebody communicated with you by standard means.
Right.
In other words, at light speed limited.
All right. Then I think that's where it fails. I thought there was an experiment that you could perform to a particle and know if it was measured or not by somebody else in the other end of the galaxy.
Unfortunately, that way won't really work, but I can tell you a different way to communicate faster than the speed of light.
Okay.
Slow down the light. Light changes its speed in different media, and that's one of the reasons light bends when it goes through glass or goes through water. And there have been experiments that have gotten light down to speed slower than a person running. So literally going from the fastest thing to the universe to I can outrun it.
Didn't know that.
Cool. No, I meant on a vacuum, of course, but
Yeah. It's not the interesting way to do telecommunications. It's just that if you want to cheat, that's one way you could do it. If you can't outrun the rabbit, take out the rabbit's feet.
Awesome. That was it. Okay. I thought, thank you very much. I was having this in my head, and now it's clear it's not possible.
I should let you know that this has definitely been something other physicists had looked into. So back in the 70s, there was a paper that came out, and it's called it basically proves something called the no-clone theorem. And it's about basically like making copies of quantum states, which was another way of trying to figure out how you could send information that gets destroyed during the measurement process. But if you could have cloned it, then you could have resolved the problem that you had mentioned. But then what was proved was the no-clone theorem, that you can't actually make copies of quantum states, and so that entire method that you were going for isn't allowed. So I'm asking you to read some 1970s physics papers.
All right. Okay, that was it. That was all I got. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Albert. All right. And that is the last call we had in queue. So a good night, I hope, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a really interesting night. It was very physics focused, which I can definitely appreciate. I'm sure you probably know Brian Greene, the physicist, or the mathematician, I think, actually. I read
physicist.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yes.
I read a bunch of stuff about, a bunch of stuff by him about string theory and things. So I already knew about the Bell experiments too in the 70s, interestingly. Super into physics, so pretty interesting.
Even though I'm ultimately sour on string theory, Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe has, I think, some of the best popular explanations of relativity and quantum mechanics that I've ever read for pop audience. I was just like, this is just so clear and wonderful. I love it. Even if string theory is bollocks, I want people to read this book just for the first 5 chapters even. It's just so great. And just to be slightly boastful, I have met Brian Greene's in-laws.
Oh, that's cool. Really?
The whole thing's at a Christmas party here in Boston.
That's cool. I live in Manhattan, and so you said NYU earlier. Michio Kaku is there, I think.
Yeah,
he's probably 3 blocks for me.
I think actually Brian Greene, he's at Columbia, so also Manhattan.
Yes. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah. Columbia, it's good, but it's no Boston.
Right.
All right, it's super chat time. So we tend to alternate back and forth on who reads these. So Owen, you take the first one here.
Awesome. From is causality a subset of the universe? If it supersedes the universe, why does it seem constrained by natural things like the speed of light and dense regions of space-time if it wasn't an emergent property of the universe?
Oh, such an easy question. um, what are causes is actually not something that we see in our fundamental equations. Causality, that is a tough one, even as a philosophical concept. So it's really hard to say where causality comes in because we don't see it in our fundamental laws themselves. And why speed of light limited? The best explanation right now is that if things were going at infinite speed, if it wasn't actually limited, you end up getting all sorts of absurdities to pop out. So it's kind of a reductio ad absurdum at this point rather than a fundamental, here's why things have to be finite speed, causally related. So like I say, easy answer. All right. We got $5 from Mike B. Did you know I've made a serious study of dad jokes? I'm a scientist.
Funny you mention. I actually have a whole. Wait, I'm sorry. I have a whole book full of dad jokes right here, as a matter of fact, and they're terrible, most of them. So a couple are good. From Jamnik06. Thanks for the dad joke, Mike B. I'll add it to my dad a bank. Oh my god. Okay.
Guys, if we're gonna do this, I'm gonna have to bring out the big guns, and it will be punishment time.
I'll tell you what, I'm not good at these, so let me just pull one. What's the most common operation in a Lego hospital? Plastic surgery, of course. I don't get it. I'm not even sure that's a joke. Is that just a statement? I don't know.
If it can somehow be that the word somehow relates to the thing that was talked about earlier, therefore it's funny. Is it actually laughing out loud funny? Only under duress.
It sounds like it's a dad joke then.
Yep, exactly. All right, we got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Every time someone tells me what most atheists think, one of my neurons burns itself out of despair. I hope someday Jackie realizes how silly he is. It is very hard to say what all atheists or most atheists think because, yeah, the phrase herding cats describes atheists, unfortunately, very well.
Yeah. From Jonathan, the line depends on a dialectical antithesis. If there weren't theists to call in, the show wouldn't exist as it does today. Checkmate, atheists. Yeah, that's basically the logic, right?
That is fair. Though I would point out that the reason we're having the dialectic is because people do believe in theism. If we had the argument between atheists and theists, even though everyone didn't believe in God, we would be navel-gazing in the worst way possible.
Right.
At the very least, that's not monetizable.
Yeah.
All right. So we got $5 from William Matz. I do not know if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, William. I apologize.
Mattis.
What superpower do you think would be great in real life for just practical reasons? Mine is the ability to change the color of anything I want to anything. I'm going to say flight is just so practical to get around, especially because of the traffic here in the Boston area.
If we're excluding like time travel or the super cool ones, I guess it would be the ability to read any book instantly. Just zip and I'm through it. That would be awesome.
Good choice.
That's me now, right? Philip Kelly.
Yes.
How are supercomputers and AI used in cosmology, i.e. testing physics models, and what their limitations, etc.? Plus, why do AI chatbots get wrong? What do they get wrong about physics? I actually was a software engineer for like years and years before YouTube, so I'll add my input, but this really is not. This is a question for you mostly. We just made a breakthrough with AI, and the breakthrough is basically AI's ability to understand context more than just like a few words, but like full sentences, paragraphs, or even more than that. And that is why we can now, generate pictures with AI and all the other crazy things that we can do in the past like couple of years. So the physics models and things, those may not be, those might be behind. They may not be using AI yet because those things take time to ramp up. I'm not sure though. All right, I'll let you have it.
Yeah, well, when it comes to like machine learning, in a sense, scientists have been using machine learning for a long time. If you include linear regression, just drawing a line through data points and say, that's the slope, there's our science. That is the most simple version of a machine learning model. And sometimes it's the best model to use, frankly. Basically, a lot of physics, especially like the stuff where it's like not possible to solve the equations analytically, you create a simulation, you run it up a zillion times, tweaking the parameters a bit to see where most of them fall out, and use that to basically say how stable of a setup this is, or does it give you the kind of expected results. Most importantly, you set up the parameters, run your simulation, and see do the outcomes actually match observations. We do that in study of galactic evolution, for example. I remember doing that as one of my senior thesis works back in the good old days. And AI or machine learning, sometimes it's even used to look for things that are anomalous in the data, find things that maybe the human eye missed. I believe there's actually been a few exoplanets discovered that way recently. So it's actively being used, though chatbots less so, and in part because chatbots don't tell you what's real. They scour the internet to create a bunch of things in their quote-unquote memory, and they might recall things that are totally false. I saw this just the other day, that apparently if you go and ask ChatGPT which number is larger, 9.9 or 9.11, ChatGPT will be absolutely insistent that 9.11 is larger than 9.9.
That's interesting.
And if you try coaxing it and tell it this is what your calculator said, it will tell you how you inputted it into your calculator wrong, or there's a mechanical error with your calculator. It will not believe something mathematically true.
That's crazy.
Yeah. All right, we got $5 more from William Matz. Nothing that would be Hero Act related, but just, I have so many job opportunities because of this. Hey, producer, show this one first.
Oh, I guess it was missed previously.
No, that was a follow-up.
Oh, okay. All right, from Brent J. Challenge idea for next fundraiser: reach a goal of 100,000 for Owen to get an I Love West Virginia tattoo. No, that's not happening. Sorry, not for 100,000, not for $1 million. I can't do it. Well, maybe for $1 million. And if it was going to me, but it's not, so I'm not getting the tattoo. Sorry, guys.
Well, let's see where your standards are. Like, what state would be the cheapest to get an I Love something for?
New York. I live in Manhattan. Right. I'd get one for free.
All right. So that's the low end. And what's going to be the state that you would have to be paid the most for to get an I Love tattoo of?
Definitely West Virginia. I lived there, and there were a bunch of nutcases that like got pissed off that I reported a teacher for talking about Jesus in the classroom, and they like were, taking pictures through my windows at night and stuff. It's crazy. So that one.
All right. So the scale of making you get a tattoo for love of a state is anywhere between 0 and $1 million. Okay, that's a bit of a spread.
I'd say, yeah, 0 and $1 million.
As for me, I have no tattoos and I have no interest in getting them. So you're going to have to raise $100,000 and then knock me out, and I have to wake up and wonder what just happened.
You wouldn't do it even if the 100,000 was going in your pocket?
I really don't know what I would do in a case like that. I just don't believe it's going to happen, and I just don't have any interest to even put it on the line. So, like I say, I'd have to get my arm twisted to agree to such a thing.
Okay. Just me or you?
I think you.
Okay. Blackwater Ted. any tips you guys can give for atheist content creators starting out? I can give a couple of tips, and then Aron can give some tips in just a second. I'm sure he probably has some. I would say part of the deal with content creation is opportunity. That's above all else, honestly. I came into the content creation sphere because people weren't talking about the subjects that I cared about, which is like Jehovah's Witnesses and things like that. There was a vacuum, so it worked out for me perfectly. The opportunity presented itself. That was just sheer luck. And then I used that opportunity when it appeared to, like, try to grow a channel and things. So a lot of it is down to luck, but above all else, you can't succeed if you never see that opportunity. So you need to treat it like a job. Release something consistently every single week or every single day or whatever. No matter what the views, doesn't matter. Irrelevant. Just don't even pay attention. Just release like it was your job. For a year, for 2 years, something. That's what I would have to say.
I don't think I can give much advice beyond that, and also you know much more about actually how to have a channel grow than I do, because like I said, mine is covered in digital cobwebs. And part of the reason is I'm not doing what a successful channel does, and that's continuously putting out content to actually create a place that people can come to and say, hey, there's something new here. So if you want to make a channel, you need an opportunity, but also an opportunity that you think you can, like, day after day, week after week, bring out new material, whether it's, I mean, now YouTube can do shorts, so you can at least grow that sort of way. But if you're not able to devote time to it, so you're producing stuff on a regular basis, don't expect to have a lot of growth.
Right, I agree. And one more piece of advice from me. Audio quality is pretty much above everything. You need to have a good microphone before even a good camera or anything, because people don't want to listen to poor quality audio. They can get past video a lot of the time in this sphere, but not audio. So if you're going to spend money on anything, make it a microphone.
All right. $5 from the Mass Debater. Please don't take that out of context. Owen, your thoughts on mass psychosis / group hallucinations and religion?
Yeah, there's I think it's a study on this subject that Jordan Peterson likes to quote. I think it's called psychogenic episodes or something. And the idea is where ideas spread like viruses. As it turns out, that study is like 300 or 400 years old and has never, there's never been any more research on it since then because it was garbage. That's just not how things spread. I mean, there's validity to memes spreading like viruses, like genes. That's why it's named meme, gene. They sound similar. But mass psychogenic episodes like trans people producing more trans people and it's all a hallucination or whatever, that's just nonsense. It's all ridiculous nonsense. Regarding hallucinations and religion, yeah, I mean, our minds produce all kinds of crazy things. We just don't understand the brain. That's part of the deal of being human, I suppose. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that people had near-death experiences and things like that, or that they believe in religion. When you hear about near-death experiences from people across cultures, you'll start to understand why religion has taken on the tones that it has, because they all describe seeing a light that they wanted to wander into. They'll all describe seeing like a relative that they missed or whatever. So anyway, just human nature.
And just a quick note on the image from Mass Debater, that if I'm correct, that his icon is the actor Jerry Orbach. And I think you should know that there's only two things I've seen him in. One, he was on Law and Order as like the sarcastic police officer for like a decade. And the only other place I've seen him was in Young Earth Creationist propaganda. So,
what?
Unfortunately, I think I remember seeing something like that where basically it's like, hey, look at this DNA evidence that mitochondrial Adam and mitochondrial Eve were hundreds of thousands of years apart. Those silly scientists. I really remember seeing that, and it was just like, Jerry, come on. I respected you at least as a character, and now I got to rethink what do I think about the police in general.
Right. That's sad, man. I bought a flat Earth curriculum off of Etsy once, and it was just absurd. Talked about it on stream. Yeah, pretty interesting. You've both just lost the game. Okay, yeah. From William Mattis, I think you both lost the game. Do you know the game?
No, I don't.
Okay, it's an interesting. You're talking about memes. It's an interesting idea that spreads from person to person. In high school, they had a thing where you're supposed to not think about the game, but if you think about it, you have to announce that you've thought about the game. So it's something that you're actively encouraged not to talk about, but spread like wildfire because people continue to think about it, because people keep talking about it. I don't know. That's the game. I thought it was interesting.
Okay. I guess I don't know if that's either sus or skippity, because I'm not enough up on the Gen Z talk.
Skibbity, I think, probably.
Okay. All right. I need more Riz.
Right.
Okay. We got $5 from the secular felinist. Very good choice. Everything I know about science I learned from Mass Effect. I have to admit, I have not played the game, but if memory serves, they do try to use quantum mechanics to communicate faster than light. So, unfortunately, yeah, video games may not give you all the science lessons you truly need. So, secular felinist. Also play Halo?
Okay. From Mahalia Laga. If you slow light, would that affect time? Isn't that the black hole time dilation thing?
No, because we are not affecting the speed of light in vacuum. And the reason light slows down in media is that when light is going through a material, material is produced, formed up from protons and electrons. The electrons have a charge, and because light is an electromagnetic wave, it will cause the electrons to vibrate, which means they will also produce their own electromagnetic wave, and that interferes with the incoming light in such a way that actually creates a group velocity that is slower than light in vacuum itself. So it doesn't cause time dilation in that same sort of way. It's a different effect that is clearly complicated, but not quite the same thing as the black hole thing.
That's fascinating.
All right, $5 from the Blackwater Ted. Opinions on the quantum nature of antimatter. Side note, I don't have the slightest idea of what I asked, but it sounded smart. Antimatter has the same quantum nature as regular matter. It's just that basically the various numbers that are associated with quantum properties are flipped. So charges are opposite, things like that. If O and I were completely made of antimatter, if the whole Earth was antimatter, everything would appear to be pretty much the same. In fact, this experiment was only done somewhat recently. We finally produced enough antihydrogen to answer the question, does antimatter fall up or fall down?
What's the answer?
And we finally were, it fall down. It acts just like regular matter in a gravitational field. That's what everyone was expecting, but it took a long time to finally be able to produce enough antihydrogen to test that out finally.
That is fascinating. Oh my God. Okay, from Kathleen Moncrief, I believe. People are shocked when they find out I'm a terrible electrician. That's my best dad joke. Okay, I get it. I didn't get it at first. I didn't even realize it was a dad joke until you said that at the end.
All right, we have 120, I believe, Mexican dollars from Anton Gomez. I keep hearing Earth is so fine-tuned. Usually I have some counter, except when it comes to exobiology, or the supposed perfect balance of how Earth wind speeds are tuned. What would you say to those? Well, it didn't seem that well tuned when the tsunami came over back in 2004 and killed over 100,000 people. That's not well tuned, in my opinion. A lot of what makes the Earth fine-tuned is the environment tuning itself to what's available. You go back in Earth history, you find out, hey, sometimes the entire Earth is a giant snowball. Sometimes it's hot as hell, and it fluctuates back and forth over millions and millions of years. That seems less like tuning, and things get jumped around, and life tries its best to keep up.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Oh, that's the last one.
Looks like so. All right. So, everyone, thank you for coming in and listening to Owen and myself for the last, 2 hours and change. I need to also thank the mods for the excellent work they did to keep this place going well and working well. I need to also thank our screener, Stephanie, that she has been going through and making sure the callers get past some good scrutiny. So thank you for bringing us some really good people through that filter. Owen, again, thank you for coming in. So please plug yourself away.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been focusing a lot on books recently, but I have a YouTube channel, Owen Morgan. I talk about religion primarily on my main channel, Owen Morgan, but I talk about politics primarily on my Owen's Fireside Chat channel. And then I just kind of hang out and I play video games and just listen to like Kent Hovind's talks or whatever other crazy nonsensical stuff, hour-long stuff. We'll sit there and listen to it and talk as a chat on my Owen Unfiltered channel, so you can check those out. Like I said, I'm writing a lot right now, owenmorgan.com, if you want to see the books that I have written or am writing. Wrote a book about Jehovah's Witnesses, historical stuff, and my experiences with them and stuff, so you can check that out. It's called Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's available on Audible and Kindle and stuff. So,
you're reminding me that of one of the books I recently wrote with my friend Jonathan Pierce on aliens and religion. Just realizing, Lacona, that we didn't talk about what the Jehovah's Witnesses might say about the existence of ET, because that's a interesting religious controversy. How does Jesus work if there's more than one planet that he has to visit?
Jehovah's Witnesses would probably say that he just would visit the planet. Or if Jesus didn't visit the planet, he'll get around to it. That would be my guess.
Well, Jesus is going to be busy. There's a lot of universe to take care of.
Right.
All right. So that wraps things up for tonight for SkepTalk. Remember, we have many other awesome shows here on the line. Tomorrow we have, oh my goodness, I need to look back at our schedule to remind myself all we have. So yes, tomorrow we have Chewed Gum with Arden Hart. Wednesday, we got The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty and Andrew Seidel. Thursday, we have the Transatlantic Call-In Show with Arden and Josie. Sunday, we got the Sunday Show with Paul and Eric with Eric and Forrest Valkai. I am now mixing up Star Trek actors with one of our line hosts. That would be a cool crossover. We need to get on that one. But Forrest and Eric for Sunday. The Sunday after-hour show is also with Forrest and Matt, and SkepTalk will be back here on Monday with Forrest and Jesse. So definitely check out all of those. We have the Patreon. We have a merch store. We got so much good stuff with this channel. Please check it all out. Any last words, Owen, before we see these wonderful credits?
I think that's it. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, we have a last-minute super chat. So we got a $4.99 chat from Sarah Wilson. My dad says in Italian restaurants, if pasta and antipasta collide, do they implode? The answer is they produce a really spicy meatball. That's the best pseudo-Italian you're going to get from me, and I apologize to all the Sicilians who I just made very angry. All right, again, thank you to our mods in chat, Stephanie for being our screener. You see all these names scrolling along the side? These are some of our very, very awesome patrons. If you go to Patreon and become a patron, you might see your name up here too.